Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome to, I'm not even sure exactly what to call this. This is my first inaugural podcast that I'm going to be completely solo. Of course, Jay is in the control room. He's been talking along. So obviously, usually Saturday nights we've kind of kept for what we're calling been wondering, things I've been wondering about. I have obviously interest in animals and wildlife and in travel and adventure, but I also have a lot of other interests. You guys know in paranormal and in cryptozoology and UFOs and all kinds of other, science, all kinds of stuff. So normally Saturday night is been wondering, but don't have any guests tonight. So that's the way it is. And right now it's a little bit weird about guests. Things are a little bit tight here in Michigan. So I wasn't sure if I was going to do a podcast tonight, but I decided I was going to give this a go. Can I have a podcast and not have a guest and see if you guys like it or not? I'm not sure. So a couple things to start with. Obviously, I'll probably be talking a lot about reptiles tonight because that's the thing I have the most knowledge of, but we might go off path a little bit. Certainly going to need your guys' help with some super chats if you have questions, not only about the topic that I'm talking about, but also if something else is on your mind that I can cover, that would be very helpful. We may go a half hour, we may go 2 hours. We'll just have to see how this whole thing goes. But obviously, I've got Jay with me, so thank you, Jay, for hanging out.
Dude, you know it, bro. Nowhere else I'd rather be.
All right, that's good stuff. So yeah, I figure, I'm going to start by I think that the philosophy behind if I do any more solo podcasts, and by the way, let me know in the chat room and in the comments afterwards if you guys like the solo. If I do any more solos, I don't know what's going to happen, but it'll probably be in the same ilk. And what I mean by that is it's going to be talking about reptiles, my philosophy behind it, maybe the path that I've been on, my philosophy behind business, life in general, might touch on some anxiety and mental health issues and so on like that over the time. Or this may be the only solo podcast that I ever do. I'm not 100% sure yet. So, I guess we'll start kind of where the whole thing started, with my business and just the direction in life. And obviously I've told people a ton of times that, since I was a little child, I was obsessed with reptiles, dinosaurs, all that type of stuff. And I just always remember, it's interesting. I know a lot of people, especially when they get into their teenage years and maybe even closer to getting out of high school, they really start struggling with what they're going to do with their life. Heck, a lot of college people struggle with what they're going to do with their life. I was pretty blessed with one thing, and that thing was that I always knew what I wanted to do with my life. And now, did I know I was going to work with reptiles and breed reptiles and in the wild path that I've been on over the last 30-something years? No way in the world. But I did know I was going to work with animals, because that was all I really ever cared about when I was a kid. That's all I watched on TV. That's every book I ever read was animal-based. So I knew I wanted to do that. And I had a special affinity to reptiles. I loved all animals, and I still do, but I definitely had a special affinity towards reptiles. So I didn't know what was going to happen and how it was going to go on, but I knew I loved them. And there was actually a pet shop. It was called the Pet Vendor, and it was on my way home from school every day. And I know a lot of people are like, oh boy, here we go with the, walk 10 miles uphill every day to school. But I mean, when I was in middle school and high school, they were very close in proximity. I did walk home, not every day, but most days I walked home. And it was literally like a 1.5 mile walk, but it didn't bother me. It was safe and no problem. And one of the reasons why a lot of times did want to walk home, what it was is, I was a single mother family and she worked, so she couldn't pick me up from school. And that was the options I had at the time. So, but what was nice is on the way home, this pet shop was there called the Pet Vendor. And at the time, there was only really 2 pet shops in Michigan that carried reptiles. There was a place called the Tropical Fish Pond, and then there was the Pet Vendor. And prior to that, there was a place called the Black Lagoon, but that was out of business. Yeah, it was a great name, Yeah. But it was out of business before I was old enough to even know about it. So I'd heard the lore of the Black Lagoon, but I had never been to the Black Lagoon. And so anyways, the Pet Vendor didn't have like a huge variety of reptiles, but they had a pretty decent amount. And again, there was no other pet shops outside the Tropical Fish Pond that was pretty much almost all reptiles, even though it was called the Tropical Fish Pond. It was almost all reptiles. And still to this day, Jeff G was a legend, and he's out in Arizona now working with tortoises and some stuff like that. But he used to supply like Alice Cooper with the snake that he traveled with on tour. And so when you would go there was this huge cage that had Alice's Cooper snake in it when he wasn't on tour. So it was just
badass.
It was a cool place.
Yeah,
and it
really
wasn't
cool.
far from the Detroit Zoo. So when I could get out there, I'd always got that. But it was like 10 miles from my house, so I had to get a drive obviously to get out there. I didn't get out there that often. But the pet vendor was on my way home every day. So literally every day, or 4 out of 5 days during the school week, I would walk home and I would stop at the pet vendor, and I'd spend anywhere from like a half hour to sometimes 3 hours a day at the pet vendor. And just kind of knew got friends with the people that worked there, and even the owner was always pretty cool with me. And finally, there was an opening to take care of. I was like, I wasn't even 15. I was like 14 and a half years old. And they brought me on to care for the reptiles. And again, I wasn't, obviously at 14, I'm not an expert on reptiles by any stretch. So, they were teaching me. Basically, all I was doing was just cleaning cages, right? Every day you had to clean the cages and water them and stuff like that. And they had a pretty high standard, for care, because every single day, every single cage had to be cleaned, which was pretty awesome for a pet shop. And I learned a lot about reptiles I worked there for like 5.5 years, 4.5, 5 years between that one. And then we actually opened up a second shop that I was actually the manager of, but It was the same type of deal. And during that time, a guy named Mark Bell, who runs a company now that's called Reptile Industries down in North Naples, and supplies all of Pet Supplies Plus and a good majority of PetSmart, not to mention tons of mom and pop shops. As a matter of fact, Mark and Kim Bell at Reptile Industries really is the largest reptile company in the world, which is interesting because most people have never even heard of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I've heard of Bell and stuff through their morphs, but that's crazy.
Yeah, like the Bell Albino and Leopard Geckos came from Mark and Kim Bell, but they have a unbelievably massive collection, but it's completely closed. Like no one's allowed there. You can never go video it. You can never go take pictures. They don't allow you to visit.
Wow.
They're very, very
crazy.
closed off. But what happened was they were actually from this area here up in Michigan, and Mark used to supply the pet vendor. He literally worked as a gas line X-ray technician. That's what his job. That's what his job was, And on the side, he bred snakes and mice and rats. So we'd buy mice and rats from Mark and Kim, and we'd buy the occasional snake. Sometimes, mainly it was like corn snakes, and obviously it was way before the ball python trade. And we just, so I got to kind of know Mark, and at the time he just had a basement full of snakes, maybe 200 snakes. Again, almost all colubrids, a few pythons and boas, but mainly all colubrids. And so I got to know him through the pet shop, and ultimately he invited me over to his house one day. And I saw his snakes there, and we just kind of started to, over the course of a year or two, became friends. And I started buying snakes directly from him rather than from the pet shop, right? And it was mainly corn snakes, king snakes, stuff like that, because he was mainly that way. But that was in the very beginning when albino Burmese pythons were just about coming on the thing. Now this is fast forward to when I was 16, almost 17 years old. By this time I had a couple hundred snakes in my mom's basement, and I had been breeding some things. And as a matter of fact, it's interesting, the first snakes I ever bred were actually a pair of corn snakes from the pet vendor. So the pet vendor,
that's awesome.
Yeah, the pet vendor, some people came in and brought a pair of adult corn snakes. And I convinced the owner of the pet shop to sell them to me. He was going to sell them, and I go, can I buy these? And I'll never forget. I was obviously you brumate colubrids in order to produce, and I suck them in this little cellar area in my mom's basement that was about 55, 60 degrees under the stairs, and usually we brumate for about 3 months. I was so excited about this, I brumated them for 12 days.
Oh, no way.
And I was I've got to bring them out of hibernation. I've got to bring them out of brumation, and we started breeding these things. So I brumated them for 12 days, started feeding them, started breeding them, and had my first clutch. It was 22 eggs.
Wow.
My first clutch of eggs ever after a 12-day brumation. And then we hatched all 22 babies. I sold, I think, about 18 of them back to Matt at the pet vendor for $10 a piece. And then I kept like 2 pair to raise up, just, because of nostalgia or whatever the case is.
You were probably freaking out too, man.
Oh my gosh. I'll never forget I'll never forget when I got the clutch of eggs. It was like the most incredible feeling I've ever had. And then of course, that 58 days of incubation was probably the most painful 58 days.
Yeah, for sure. Cause you're like, come on, please just hatch out, be fine.
But I remember when the babies hatched out just being like, wow. And that's really what started my career breeding snakes. That was like the culmination. I finally bred snakes for the first time, and then, like I said, right around that time, albino Burmese pythons came onto the scene, and that was the first really investment snake, right? And a guy named Anson Wong, who was a world-renowned smuggler of reptiles over in Southeast Asia, and Tommy Crutchfield were friends, and so Tommy brought in this albino Burmese python from Anson, ultimately sold it to Bob Clark. Bob Clark bred it, produced them, and then they were, all of a sudden, that was the first investment snake. And so by this time, Mark and Kim had grown from like their basement to now their basement and their garage full of snakes. And he had kind of gotten into Burmese pythons and a bunch of other pythons and boas as well, D'Albert's pythons, stuff like that. So his collection was really growing. Still working as a gas line weld or X-ray technician. Kim was working full-time with snakes at that point, just because she was a stay-at-home mom and all that other stuff. So she was doing that. Mark was working his job. But Mark got albino Burmese pythons from Bob Clark. They were $1,600 a piece, and he bought like 40 of them to resell some. So I'm assuming he got them at a cheaper price.
Because
he bought like he bought a bunch of them. And I went over, and I'll never forget sitting in Mark's living room. And when the shipment arrived, and because he knew I was going to buy a pair for $3,200, and again, that was like every dollar I had to my name was $3,200. I had like $3,400. Let's say. And somehow I convinced my mom to let me take all this money and buy a pair of albino Burmese pythons. So I was super excited. I go over to Mark's house. Unbagging these things. They're biting the living shit out of us. I mean, we're both bleeding like crazy. I don't really know how to sex snakes, so I'm just holding on to them. Mark is sexing them and setting the males in this pile, females in this pile, and they all look pretty much the same. But I remember, again, getting bit a ton because I just kept on looking like, which one am I going to take? Which albino Burmese am I going to pick for my first albino Burmese? And at the time, I had a giant female named Cleo Burmese python that I had acquired that was like a legit 18, 19 foot, 180 pound female. And so I'd never bred Burms, but I had this big girl as well. And sure enough, I pick out this pair of albino Burmese pythons. And in the meantime, I went from breeding the one corn snakes to, producing quite a few corn snakes, some Solomon Island boas. I even produced Dumerals boas, which was pretty rare back in that time. I had Brazilian rainbow boas. I had a whole bunch of stuff, but the albino Burmese were going to be that was the creme de la creme, right? Wow, I get this pair of cutting edge albino Burmese pythons. And so sure enough, we raised those up, myself and Lori. By this time, Lori was in the scene now. She was part of my life, and we bred the male albino to Cleo. And then we bred the albinos together. And what's interesting is I only saw copulation one time. Now that male bred Cleo probably 15 times.
Wow.
And and kept putting him in with the albino female. Kept on putting him with the albino female. Nothing. And then finally, I saw one copulation at 2:00 in the morning. I used to go down there. My bedroom was downstairs, so I used to wake up in the middle of the night with the flashlight and go in there and look.
Try to see if they were catch him up.
And finally, I see him hooked up one time. Sure enough, she ovulates. She laid 22 eggs that year. Cleo laid 58 eggs, I believe it was, that were all heterozygous. But what was funny, when I was pulling the eggs from the female albino, which weirdly enough I never named, which is weird. It is weird, right? That for a big part of my career, nothing was hardly nothing was named
at all.
A few out of the thousands of animals I had, just a couple were actually named.
Ones that probably meant a little bit more. Maybe it was your first of a specific snake or something.
Exactly. But most of my stuff I wouldn't name. Now it's almost everything I name. Almost every time.
And I love that too. It gives you such a cool connection to the animal.
I think so.
Yeah, I do too.
I think so. Before we go on to the remainder of this story, because I got to tell you that, let's hit the super super chats because I want you guys to be a part of this kind of inaugural solo Barczyk podcast, and we'll see if we continue to want to do this going forward.
Hell yeah, and I got one for you after all these too.
Sure,
actually.
absolutely.
So Max said, so grateful for this content and community, life-changing.
Thanks, Mac. And we appreciate you. I mean, obviously, you're a big part of things here, modding up things, keeping people under control.
Giving us didgeridoos.
Giving us didges.
Dude, we think about you every day, bro.
Yeah, we didge every day, and it's because of you, Max. So thank you so much, brother.
Laura said, I haven't seen Diddy and Dixie lately. Are they okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, man. We let them loose.
We let them loose. Yeah, no, they're gone now.
No. Diddy and Dixie, I just had them out today at a tour, and they're doing fantastic. I was actually a little bit surprised at how lively they are, because the cage they're in cools off during the winter because it's in the front window. I mean, we have heating elements in there and big power sun bulbs.
But it's obviously twice as hot.
But during the summer, they're getting the summer heat and they're on fire and they're just like fired up. During the winter, they slow down. But I was surprised at how, they came out, they climbed up my leg, Dixie did the old, climb up and take a super worm out of my mouth.
We'll have to do the vlog piece maybe this week on Dixie.
And the thing is, guys, when you don't see an animal for a week or 2 or even 3, it doesn't mean anything happened to them. You know what I mean? It just means that we just haven't got them in the vlog.
There's not a story or something.
Yeah, I mean, if something were to happen with Diddy and Dixie, I would certainly tell you guys. I mean, those are very, they're big parts of our
lives,
our stuff. But no, they're doing fantastic. I know someone asked, I think in the last few days I've had a bunch of people like, where's Aries? Where's this? Where's that? And we
just got back from a big trips too, so it takes a bit.
Yeah, we're slowly getting back in the rhythm. But no, they're doing fantastic, and we'll get them in the vlog for you.
Amanda says, thoughts on dragon snakes, and would you ever try to have them at the Reptarium? They are sick, dude.
They're beautiful snakes. I mean, they're one of the most amazing snakes. I remember when they were first found. I remember when they literally found them back in the wild. I don't know if they thought they were extinct or they just hadn't been found for years and years and years, but I remember it wasn't that many years ago that they rediscovered them.
Yeah.
They do terrible. They absolutely, this is the thing, Amanda, is that legitimately, okay, it's a very tough topic, but I'm going to try to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
If I buy a dragon snake, I am supporting collectors getting that dragon snake, knowing 99.999% of them will die in captivity.
Yeah.
And so, on one hand, it's going to be amazing when someone finally breeds dragon snakes and gets captive bred, much like Mandarina, right? Mandarin rat snakes. 99% of the wild Mandarin rat snakes die, period. 99%.
Sunbeams, Philippine sunbeams.
Yeah, so many of them. But when you breed captive mandarins, they're like corn snakes. So it's like, in a way, you don't want to say, don't import mandarin rat snakes, because if they wouldn't have imported them, we wouldn't have captive bred them and they wouldn't be amazing. The same goes for dragon snakes. One day, someone's going to produce dragon snakes that came from the wild, and then hopefully there won't be any more demand for wild ones, and they can stop collecting them that just end up dying, and we can buy captive bred dragon snakes.
That do well,
But everything I've heard about them is just a nightmare. I mean, a freaking nightmare. So, not to mention, on top of all of that, they're horrible display animals because they hide in moss all the time. So, we will definitely never have them on display at the Reptarium until someone captive breeds them, and we can get captive babies, which may or may never happen. But absolutely wonderful snakes, Amanda. I hope someone one day can have some success with them, because they are definitely cool.
Yeah, me too. And then Matthew said, have you given any thoughts to having Joe Rogan as a guest, or has he ever reached out to you? That would be incredible.
Wow, that'd be amazing.
It would be great.
So I have tried to get on Rogan a number of times. A good friend of mine, a friend of mine named Matt Staggs was the booker for Joe Rogan for most of up until recently. So we had communication with Joe on a number of occasions. As a matter of fact, I was on Matt Staggs' podcast. And again, Matt Staggs was the guy that booked all of the guests for Joe Rogan. And Matt, on a number of occasions, talked to Joe about having me on before Joe blew up and became, the biggest name in podcasting. He was still doing very well, but I was just a fan of Joe Rogan. I was a fan of everything that he had done, and he wasn't getting, he might get 100,000 views on a video or something like that back when we were trying to get on his show. And he just, he just wasn't interested, quite frankly. He said that he didn't really like reptiles. he was afraid. I don't know if he didn't like him. He said he was afraid of reptiles, so he really didn't think that it made sense for him to have a reptile guy on. Now, interestingly enough, he ended up having Forrest Galante on, I think twice, who's an Animal Planet guy, not necessarily a reptile guy, but an animal guy, who Forrest is a guy who I also know, I'm friends with, and is a very good guy, really nice person. He's got a show called Extinct or Alive on Animal Planet, and I've known Forrest for probably, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years, something like that. But Joe would never come on my podcast. I shouldn't say never come on my podcast, but I don't think Joe has any reason to come on my podcast. I think he's pretty much owning the podcast world. I won't give up on it. Again, Matt Staggs is no longer the booker for Joe Rogan. I don't know who is. But one day, things happen. You know what I mean? So I've met Joe a number of times. By the way, a wonderful human being, really an amazing human being, really kind, took the time every time I met him, took the time to make me feel real special. So I have nothing but mad respect for not only his intelligence, his podcast, but also him as a person because of my personal interactions with Joe. So I would love to one day be able to interact with him on some level. Again, and again, I never say never. So we'll just keep on plugging away.
Amber says, hello, Brian. Thank you for all the vlogs and podcasts. They make my days.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you too. And all your guys' support means the world to me. Again, without you guys, I couldn't do the things that I want to do. And through this podcast today, obviously I'll be taking super chats, but also I want to talk about that journey, and maybe it'll inspire some of you guys. And if I do more solo podcasts, I want not only to talk about my philosophy on business and life, but all things, like how you can better yourself as a business person, as maybe your mental health, physical health, so on like that. I mean, these are things I'm really passionate about. I would say if I were going to quantify my passion in life, I have a lot of interest in life, but my main interests are obviously animals, reptiles being the biggest, part of that. Business and physical and mental health. Those are like my top things. And of course, in that is family and friends and
but outside of that.
But I mean that mental and physical health is attached to family and friends and your support staff. And so I'll talk a lot about that type of stuff. So hopefully you guys will get something out of this. Maybe you'll love these types of podcasts and you want me to do more, just me talking. Maybe you're going to want me to have this. Let me back up for a second. I'm going to be a little bit erratic here, but that's the way my mind thinks, is that, this podcast is kind of analogous to Joe Rogan, the way Joe Rogan does his podcast. Obviously, you're always going to want to emulate who's doing it the best, and Joe is the best at this time. Not necessarily the best podcast, but certainly achieving the most in this podcast. I think he is certainly one of the best podcasts, if not the best. But my point is that, Joe has this through story that he's, either boxing, MMA, and of course, comedy. And I look at this podcast, or what I envision this podcast to be, is the same thing. And what I mean by that is that not every Joe Rogan podcast is about MMA, boxing, or comedy, but that's still his through story. And to me, that's the same thing that I want to do with this podcast, is the through story being animals, reptiles, and the things I'm passionate about. But that doesn't mean that that's all we're going to talk about. We're going to have, again, we had Wes on, the comic guy. We had, the NFL retired, Super Bowl winner on. I definitely, have some people lined up for like cryptozoology. We've got Justin Adishu, who is a great YouTuber slash editor and videographer. I've got a lot of other YouTube friends that I'm going to be bringing on that have nothing to do with animals. But if you guys enjoy the animal side of things and just want to talk about animals, this may be the way to do it. Is to have maybe a separate podcast that is just me and Jay jabbering about reptiles, answering your questions, and coming up with the whole thing. So let's hit these last couple of super chats, and then I'm going to get back to the albino Burmese story.
All right, we got Tom Murphy says, Brian, I bought 3 sets of ball pythons from you last year. They were 2019s. When can I start to breed them as far as age-wise? It goes by weight, right?
Yeah, mainly weight, a little bit of age. And first off, thank you for the business. So typically, a male could breed at 450 to 500 grams at about 6 to 8 months old. I like to wait a year and a half, get them a good 600 to 700 grams. I don't like my males to be much more than 900 grams because I think they get a little lazy. So 700 to 800 grams, a year and a half old, is a really good range. Females, you can't breed at a year and a half old if they hit 1,500 grams. But again, I like to wait 2.5 years, get them a solid 17, 18, 2,000 grams, something on that lines. I think that longevity-wise, your females that are waiting an extra year, that are a little bit bigger, are going to be better breeders long-term, right?
Wow.
So essentially, if you breed a female too young, a lot of times she gets locked into a small. I'll give you an example. I have a champagne ball python. You might remember, Jay. We produced a champagne head ghost female this year, and I had said when we pulled the clutch that she hadn't produced in like 5 years.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Right. So the reason is she was 18 months old and like 1,400 grams when she laid eggs, and then didn't lay eggs for 5 more years.
Wow.
If I would have waited 1 more year, she would have probably laid eggs every year. And right now, she's finally getting to the point where she's probably 2,000 grams. But from the first year I bred her at 1,400 grams until really last year, she only gained maybe 15. She was at 1,600 grams because I think that cycle, you lock her in at that first cycle. Now, some females won't do that, but my opinion is wait 2.5 years. It's worth the wait. Be patient. And that's something I'm going to talk about in my notes here as we're going on about being patient about things, because in business in general, patience is much more important than people give it credit for. So a lot of times people think you need to chase, you need to run after things. Oh my God, if I don't do it this year, I'm going to be too late. I've learned over the last 30 something years of being in business that you let business come to you. As soon as you feel like you're going to lose if something doesn't happen, that's when you're probably making bad decisions.
Yeah, it's almost like you're forced into it, right?
Don't force anything. Let it come to you.
Cameron said, I know you had trouble with leaks. I'm in the HVAC industry and new Calgon 4296-51 leak sealer spray works, makes Flex Seal look like a glue stick.
Wow. Can you send me an email on that, dude? I'd love to hear about that product because, and by the way, we oh my God, knock on very, very 200-year-old cherry wood.
Fancy. Subtle flex.
It looks like Lori fixed the leak.
Dun, dun.
It looks like Lori fixed the leak. So, but I still would like that stuff because I guarantee you I'm going to have more leaks down the road. So, and that sounds amazing. But it wasn't. I don't think it was as much about Flex Seal working or not working. It's just finding the leak.
Yeah, that was
like
the hard
where
part.
it is. And so Lori spent like 2.5, 3 hours, literally painstakingly going through every single place she thought there could be a slight leak and sealing it up, with M1. Which is like a silicone sealant. And now it's been 3 days running and we have no water on the ground. So, I'm optimistic about, cautiously optimistic, I should say, that we may have actually finally fixed that leak. But again, send me an email because I'm sure that I'll need that stuff at some point.
Amanda says, I love Axanthic, especially when combined with pied or clowned or bamboo. Axanthic pied is my #1 favorite. What morph combos, in your opinion, makes the best black and white snakes or black, white, and gray?
Oh, gosh, I tell you what, there's that JD Constriction. If you don't follow him online, he's got great Axanthics. A lot of his, spider stuff, like Axanthic killer bees are freaking awesome. I think that they seem to be anything that has a lot of white in it, calico, spider, pied, the white contrast is really well. Like, I think Axanthic clowns are amazing as babies, but are kind of not that pretty.
They're a little dull.
They kind of dull out and don't look so good because they don't have the contrast. You got to remember, Axanthic looks great as a baby, but it does increase brown as it gets older. That iridophore starts to come through, causing the black to turn brown. So if you don't have something that wildly contrasts that brown, it starts to get really muddy and it doesn't really look that interesting. So Axanthic's a weird one, right? I love Axanthic stuff, but it is weird. A lot of combinations you do with Axanthics turn out to not look very interesting when they get older. So as babies, they're amazing. And I remember Mark Mandick from Marcus Jane Ball Pythons once said that, he was interested in producing snakes that got better with age, not worse with age.
Love that. That's awesome.
And a lot of ball pythons reach their peak beauty at about 300 to 500 grams and then start going downhill after that. So that's something to think about with Axanthics, is because typically they do get uglier as they get older.
Stephanie said, Jay, do you keep snakes? And I do. I have like 5 ball pythons. I have a Amazon tree boa, a Peruvian red tail boa, and a carpet python, a Darwin's carpet python.
Nice eclectic collection.
Yeah, that's it. That's it for right now. And then David just threw $14 just for love,
Thanks,
dude.
David. I appreciate you guys. And thank you guys for all the super chats. Let's jump in. We'll jump back into some super chats in a little bit. I do want to finish up this albino Burmese thing and start getting into some other topics, but we will catch your super chats. I promise you. You guys are going to help us get through this this solo event. And again, like I said, let me know if you guys like this, if it's something that you're interested in me doing. I don't know if we'd add another night or if I don't know what we're doing. We're still trying to figure out the podcast thing. So anyways, female albino Burmese python lays 22 eggs. And I'll never forget, I was flipping out. I was legitimately flipping out. I go in there. I saw her starting to lay 1 or 2 eggs at night, right? And so I could barely sleep all night, but I didn't want to, because one of the things that happens with all snakes, and I see a lot of people on Instagram making this mistake, and I'm telling you, it is going to bite you in your ass if you keep doing this, is like taking Instagram pictures and videos of snakes laying eggs. You have to be super careful. If you do it, and you can do it, because we did some of it this year too, you have to just be super slow and not disturb. Some snakes will go into like a trance-like system. If they're in that trance, they don't care. But if you open that cage and they twitch, that can literally stop them from laying eggs and they get egg bound. And a lot of Burmese pythons were very notorious for egg binding because they have so many eggs. They're going to have 20, 30, 40, 50, even up to 100 eggs.
Wow.
So a lot of things can go wrong. Oviduct twists, oviduct folds, they can have tears in oviducts, all kinds of different things can happen. So when I bred Burmese, which I did for probably about 10 years solid, I would say about 10% of my females would get egg bound. I'd either have to have surgery or I'd have to do some sort of thing. Sometimes they would just, pass on their own. Sometimes you'd use a medication called oxytocin. And it helps them move eggs. So, but if you have a tear or a fold or a twist, that oxytocin doesn't help, So anyways, point is that I was nervous. I hardly slept that night, but I didn't want to keep going back and checking on this girl. And so finally in the morning, I get up, I get in there. Sure enough, she's done. She's coiled around this beautiful clutch of eggs. I like go to peek. I pull her off. She again, 22 eggs, not a big girl, 18 months old. She's maybe 10 foot, but like Sunrise's size, almost identical to Sunrise. And so I'm just so focused on these eggs and just the elation. Because again, you got to remember, I'm now an 18-year-old kid. This is a clutch of eggs that's probably worth, $30,000. And I literally not even paying attention to the snake. I'm just looking at the eggs. She fucking rails my hand. I mean, rails my hand.
Not fun.
I mean, just crushes me to the point where literally my knuckle on my first index finger could not bend properly for about a year. because she literally slid it, and I think I don't know if a tooth got caught in there, but literally for a year it did not heal properly. And when I would bend my finger, it would hurt. Damn. But anyways, pulled 22 eggs, hatched 22 babies. There was one baby. Again, something that happened with albino Burmese pythons, very notorious, was eye issues. One eye, no eye, stuff like that. Not like huge, but every clutch you would have albinos, you'd have 1 or 2 that had no eyes or 1 eye. So we did hatch one-eyed albino and 21 beautifully perfect babies. They sold for $1,250 a piece that year. I also, again, had 58 eggs from Cleo, and I think I hatched about 52 babies, something like that. And hats were selling for about $800 a pair. So
wow.
You can imagine between the head albinos and the albinos, and then we produce a bunch of corns and kings and milks that year. I think we net profited at about $40,000 to $50,000 that year when I was 18 years old. Now,
that's huge for somebody.
It was
18.
huge at 18 crazy. Years old. I mean, not
unheard of,
not
almost.
Selling drugs.
Yeah.
And so that was really what started BHB. That year I filed as an LLC. And that was from that day, that was 1989. BHB was officially a business. Now it's a C corp, but at the time it was an LLC. And that was what started it. And ironically enough, albino Burmese pythons were the thing that really got the whole thing rolling with reptile breeding, right? Because for the first time, people were able to make that kind of money. Because prior to that, you might make a few bucks. But for the most part, you were trading. You were trading this snow corn for this striped corn, or you were trading this for that, or you were selling this and then buying that. And no one was really making money. All of a sudden, now people had the ability to make huge bucks, or not huge bucks, but decent money.
And I guess too, because not only that the snake is beautiful and it's a new morph, but it's laying a lot of eggs. Probably helps, right?
And what was interesting, much like the ball pythons, people that, and I'm going to talk about ball pythons in a little bit and how that whole thing, but much like the ball pythons, where people that hated ball pythons all of a sudden sold off all their snakes to breed ball pythons because that was where the money was. The same thing happened with Burmese pythons. Pretty much every reptile breeder, hobbyist / now new career breeder, bred Burmese pythons. I mean, like Burmese pythons were the ball python of the late 90s and early 1990s, late 80s and early 90s, which is crazy to me to think that there's this whole hobby that was built on 18-foot snakes. I mean, think about that. I mean, that was the whole thing. People were buying 18-foot snakes like now we buy ball pythons.
So crazy.
And again, after albinos came patternless green Burmese and then labyrinth Burmese and granite Burmese and hypo Burmese and all these other things came down the road that just kept adding to the allure of, again, it was the first kind of franchise of reptiles, right? Was Burmese pythons. And then back then, ball pythons were considered garbage. I mean, completely considered garbage animals. My second snake I ever had was a ball python named Axel. And yes, Guns N' Roses was just out, yes. And that's why it was named Axel.
Hell
so
yeah.
It literally, the first Guns N' Roses album dropped, and I loved Guns N' Roses, so I named it Axel after Axl Rose, obviously.
Shit.
But I love ball pythons. Unfortunately, it was a wild caught. It died after a couple years of me having it. Never ate once for me, not even one time. We force-fed it a bunch, but it eventually died. But I always loved ball pythons, and actually shortly after Axel passed away, I had the opportunity to buy my first captive baby normal ball python, and I did. And I had that snake for over 20 years, just a normal male, normal male.
Cool, though.
I had it over 20 years, I think it was like 24 years. And but I was always into ball pythons. So as time was progressing and my collection of Burmese was growing and my collection of corns and kings and milks was growing and all this other stuff, I wanted to get into ball pythons because I liked them. So I was raising up a bunch of normal ball pythons. There were no mutations at all at the time. And then when mutations started to trickle into the country, myself, Kevin McCurley at Nerd, and Tracy Barker at VPI were basically the only three people in the country that were buying mutation ball pythons, unless it was an albino, which Bob Clark had bought, and pied that actually a guy named Brian Sharp was buying. Ernie Wagner was another guy that bought some pies, or a pied, and then Pete Call, obviously, who proved pieds to be genetic, was the only other person. So besides pies and albinos, basically no one else wanted ball pythons but myself, Kevin McCurley, and Tracy Barker. And so I was buying up these ball pythons as they were coming in from Africa, ghost ball pythons, striped ball pythons, whatever, any kind of mutation that we could find. I bought, one of the first clown ball pythons at the time, a bunch of different animals. But I remember like some of these breeders were making fun of me. I was still, you got to remember, most of the breeders at that time were older breeders, right? They were the older crowd, and I was like this younger guy. I was still in my late teens, early 20s during this time, and I already wasn't being really taken very serious. And that's one of the reasons why I talk, Jay, I've talked to you about this. Like when young kids come in, even 15 years old, that are really passionate, I give them the same amount of respect as I would someone that's 35 and been breeding snakes for 20 years.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's important that 15-year-old gets the respect they deserve, because they may be the next big name in the ball python world or the corn snake world or not. It doesn't even matter. You still give them the same respect because they're passionate about what they do, right? And I was already kind of like, oh, that's that kid that thinks he's going to be a big breeder one day, And so they used to make fun of me about ball pythons, like, oh, you're getting into ball pythons, you're an idiot. And I remember Mark Bell, who was, by the way, if I were to say, what's the one person that had the biggest impact on me? My mentor, my the guy that I looked at as the guy that I wanted to emulate. It would have been Mark Bell. And still to this day, I have tremendous amount of respect for Mark.
That's awesome.
We don't I don't talk to him hardly ever, and our paths have certainly went in completely different opposite directions. But Mark was a huge part of my life when I was growing, and without him, I wouldn't have I would probably never have bred snakes, quite frankly, you know. So I mean, at least not as a profession for so many years. But I remember Mark was making fun of me about ball pythons, you know, saying that oh yeah, you go have fun with your ball pythons, little kid type of thing.
Wow.
But I will say this: I remember when the ball python industry finally started to pop, and basically what happened was, first, the albinos came out with Bob Clark. A guy named Jamie Quick was the first one that bought them down in Florida. And then he started producing them. A few other people were starting to produce albinos. Then Pete Call produced the pieds. They were $25,000 a piece. People were standing in line to pay $25,000. All of a sudden now, the Burmese had died down, and ball pythons were starting to take the Burmese spot, right? As the king of investment ball python or investment snakes. And I do remember, and I'll give Mark a lot of credit for this. Now, fast forward 3-4 years, and Mark, we were at a show out in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was the end of the day. Everyone's packing up to go back to their hotels and whatnot. And I remember Mark saying, and he's much like me, Mark, like people that don't know me know I have like an insane memory. Like, I mean, it's really a haunting memory. I remember everything that everyone ever tells me. And Mark is very much the same way. And I remember Mark just out of nowhere saying, hey, Brian, remember when I said, you were an idiot for keeping ball pythons? And I said, oh, yeah, I remember that very well, as a matter of fact, Mark. And he said, he goes, boy, did I miss the boat on that one.
Wow.
and so that kind of gave me a lot of vindication, because it was at that show that Ralph Davis was at that show, myself, Kevin McCurley, and we were crushing it with ball python sales. and Mark was like behind the... Now, Mark ended up building an amazing ball python collection and made a ton of money on ball pythons. I think he still does them. I don't think he's as involved as he once was, but nevertheless, it was kind of a cool vindication to have one of your mentors admit that you did something right. But what I always have said is, it wasn't that I was some great prognosticator of the future for ball pythons. It was the fact that I just loved ball pythons.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I just loved.
I bought them when no one wanted them. So I didn't think like, oh, I was buying them as an investment. I bought them because I loved them. I just was in love with that animal. And I was just fortunate to be on the very front end of the ball python revolution. And then, of course, for 15, 20 years, we were on the top of that world,
It's funny. I actually have a friend, and it's not the same, but it's kind of, synonymous, where he was buying like Bitcoin like way before and like Bitcoin was ever big. Mm-hmm. And then he's a millionaire now. He like moved out to some big cabin in Colorado because he just happened to have a bunch when it popped. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time, right. But I made a lot of mistakes during that time of my life too. And what I mean, not mistakes as far as like, bad judgments is, with drugs or alcohol or anything like that. What it was is I spent too much money on reptiles, like no matter how much money I made, I spent all of it and more. Like I couldn't, I was a pretty bad businessman is what it is. And that's another thing, again, I'm passionate about now, and I'll talk about during these podcasts that are solo is, just business. I think that, and I was recently on MJ's podcast with Ozzy Boyds and Justin Kabelika, and I posed this question to him and to them, and Justin didn't answer, but Ozzy did, and I said, I've been doing this since I was 17 years old, and it's a long time, and I said, can you name one person that bred reptiles exclusively, like nothing else? All you did was breed reptiles and became rich. Not that getting rich is the goal necessarily, but why not, right? Like, I always hate when people say like, oh, you're just about the money, because my attitude is, there's nothing wrong. Don't be embarrassed to make money, especially don't be embarrassed to make money off something you love. That is the dream.
It's the opposite of that.
It's the dream. Yeah. If you can do what you love and make money, God, you're doing it right. You know what I mean? And so my question is name one breeder that has gotten rich just breeding snakes. And Ozzy had a great comeback to that. And I had never really thought about it, but he just said, but that's that way in every business. Very few people get rich doing one thing. They typically, use that one thing to build into real estate investments, stocks investments, what other investments, and that's where really true wealth comes from.
That is a very fair point.
It's a really fair point, because I don't know of anyone that just bred reptiles that became rich on just reptiles. Like Mark Bell became rich because he took reptile money and bought real estate. And the list goes on and on. Casey out in Seattle, I just completely blanked on his last name. He got rich because he bought stocks and became a multimillionaire from the 100,000. He invested 100. I don't know if I ever told you this story.
No,
but he had $100,000 that he had built up from breeding reptiles. And a friend of his was a stock guy. This was in the very early days of the internet. And Casey had a son that they didn't have a mom. He was a single dad.
Yeah.
And they lived in a 2-bedroom rented house. And so he gained $100,000 through breeding reptiles. He was a mailman, by the way. And he was ready to buy a house for his kid. So he's like, I want a house. And this friend of his as a stockbroker said, do you really need a house right now? I mean, like right now, do you need a house? And he said, well, no, we're fine renting. He said, but whatever. And he said, I want you to take that $100,000 and I want you to put it into a couple stocks and just wait a couple years. So those stocks were Amazon, Google, and Microsoft.
Damn, dude.
He bought Amazon for 24 cents a share.
And how much is it right now, roughly?
$3,000 a share.
Damn, dude.
So, and that's split many times. So anyways, my point was the last time I was out at Casey's house, which was 8 years ago, maybe even 9 years ago, he had almost $30 million in stocks.
Holy shit.
From a $100,000 investment. But that was a lightning in a bottle, but I guess my point is that that's what I found with breeding reptiles, so for interestingly enough, every dollar I made bringing in and going out was from reptiles up until about 6 years ago. So all those years for 30, this is my 33rd breeding season. So for all those years, for 6 years, let's say, I had no other income. It was reptiles or it was spending reptiles on reptiles. That was it. And I had great years where we did really well, and I had years that I barely could survive. I mean, to the point where there was sometimes I was massively in debt, and then I would have to have a great year just to get myself out of debt. And I mean, there was times I owed my rodent guy $30,000, and I always paid him off. That's why he would let me get $30,000 in debt with him. I always came up with the money, and I always paid him off.
That goes quick with a big collection too.
Yeah, it does. I mean, gosh, when I was at the peak of my ball python production, which I had 1,700 adult females, we were going through $5,000 to $6,000 a week.
Yeah, so that's a month
in live rodents.
A little over a month.
So it only took a month to get to $30,000.
Yeah.
And there were certain times a year where I just wasn't making much income, so I'd be like, hey, dude, you got to float me, man. You got to float me, but I'll be okay once August comes, once Orlando comes.
Once that one
comes,
show.
I'm going to be good. I'm back. But it was a dangerous way to live, so my point is about 6 years ago, weirdly enough, and I've told this story, is that the reptile hobby kind of turned their back on me and made me out to be a bad person. I was, my animals were all sick. They were all dead, dying. They had mites. I was a terrible person. And again, 99.9% of what was said about me was 100%. 99% was 100%.
But I get what you're saying.
But most of what was said about me was lies. But that was okay. It just happened. But interestingly enough, with that caused me to diversify my life. And start making other investments and put my money into other things and move in different directions in my life. And that's when I became successful and financially successful, because success is something that's
measured in different ways,
very different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if you came to me and said, Brian, you could barely pay your bills, but you're going to be happy, no anxiety, and you're going to have a loving family and friends, or you can be really rich and full of anxiety, and so I would say fuck the anxiety and the richness. I'll go with this success. But my success in the last 6 years, financially has been good. Overwhelmingly, everything else I do, I love. The only thing that's caught me this last 6 or 8 months, of course, you guys know, is anxiety, which I'm getting much, much, much better on. And I'll talk about that as we go on with these types of podcasts as well. But but I'm happier than I've ever been in my life as far as my family, my friends, my businesses, my obviously finances, and just all the things that are in life that are good. But that was through diversification. So Ozzy had talked about, and I've been talking with Ozzy a bit more. He's a really interesting person. Of course, this is Ozzy from Ozzy Boyds. He's really good about like finances, right? And he talks about, and I think this is a very aggressive investment strategy, but he talks about and taking 40% of every net dollar you have. Now, just so you guys don't know the difference, gross is what you make, right? Like if you make $100,000, you've grossed $100,000. You take all of your expenses away, and then you net whatever you net, right? So one of the things I always talk about is like when someone tells me they make $100,000, I always say, did you make $100,000 or did you gross $100,000? And a lot of times they'll be like, well, no, I grossed $100,000. And I'll go, well, what did you make? What did you put in the bank at the end of that $100,000? And if it's $5,000, you didn't do very well in life. Yeah, you made $5,000. Yeah. You didn't make $100,000. So it's all about what you can net, not what you can gross. BHB used to gross $3 million a year, but my net was garbage. Now I make considerably less gross, but I net higher than I've ever netted, so that's important, this thing. So I think a lot of economists or financial advisors will tell you to take about 10% of your net and invest into tangible investments. Not reptiles, not racks, not, whatever, into things that the bank would look at as assets, real estate, vehicles. And again, vehicles can be a terrible investment too, but it's still a value that a bank will give you a loan on.
Yeah.
Ozzy actually said he takes 40%.
He's smart, but it's hard.
It's hard. If you could do 40%, you're doing good. So anyways, the point is that, I think that's important in business too, is that, you build, in the beginning, you may have to be pretty aggressive about investing into your business to grow it, because, the one thing you don't want to do is take too much profit out of your business because it starves your business, right? And the last thing you want to do is be going on vacation and starve your business,
Right.
So be smart with that. But once you get to a point where you're actually making money, it's important to diversify. We have 7 income streams in our business, our life, and I'd like to add 1 or 2 more streams in the next year or two that are passive streams of money that don't cause. So now a lot of my income streams are don't cause work.
Because that's the big thing, right? You can't have 7 businesses that you have to put full time and energy in. It's just there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah, we basically do obviously YouTube, BHB, and Reptarium take up a lot of time,
brain space.
And then the other businesses run themselves or are investments that other people run and so on like that. So anyways, let's hit a couple more super chats. We'll get into some more reptile talk. On the flip side, I'm sure I'll be answering some of this stuff in super chats too.
Alex says, "Hey Brian, when are you going to do Legends of Reptile Keeping series as for the podcast? I think that would be very interesting to learn the history of the hobby."
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to do on snake bites originally, or animal bites. Obviously COVID, put a damper on that, because the legends of reptiles are all going to be older people. And right now, older people really don't feel like being around other people for this. But I promise you, that is going to be something that happened. I've already talked to Tommy Crutchfield, and his name comes up a lot on this podcast.
Dude, I think it'll be such a fucking funny podcast, though.
He's already said he'd love to come up. He hates cold weather, so we'll probably have to wait till the spring. And then by the spring, I think life will be a lot better.
It'll be easier to get guests in. It is kind of hard right now. Michigan's a different animal.
but I would love to bring the legends of reptiles into this this podcast. Might be
I think for what we're doing right now, this is the spot.
Yeah, this is maybe the spot for the legends of reptiles. So I'd love for you guys to know all of the information I know about the legends of reptiles, and the legendary people in the reptile business. And then I'm sure there's a lot that I would learn if I do it as well. So, but I'm a student of history, not just reptile history, but history as a whole. And it's the hobby is so much more interesting than most people know. You know, most people don't know what happened in the early days. Most people don't know the people. And I only know what's happened since the 70s because certainly I was too young in the 70s. But by the time I got into it to the late 80s, it was early enough where I heard stories of the last 20 years, you know. You know, most people now that are getting into it in the, you know, maybe the 2010 to 2020 era, you might be hearing about the late 90s.
And so, it's like much deeper than y'all know too, because I've had the privilege of being on a lot of car rides and just doing trips with you. So like we get into topics like this, and it goes deep, y'all.
Yeah, no, and I think so. Yeah, definitely stay tuned. We're gonna do that. I mean, that's a mission of mine, is to get to a point where we can really educate people on the past of what happened in this amazing hobby.
Lisa says, "Hey Brian and Jay, hope you guys are doing great. Need some great, not so expensive Christmas present ideas for girls and guys. Sending love from far away."
Wow.
Well, that's
Ho Drogo.
Yeah, Ho Drogo merch.
Ho Drogo merch.
Check out the link in the description.
Yeah, link in the description. Ho Drogo. Not saying that you should, but you should.
But it's really cute. Yeah, I'd love it.
No, I don't know, man. You know, it's funny. I'm the worst guy on that, dude. You know, because I don't put a lot of value in material things.
Well, I'm the opposite. I'm like, all my shit's like, I need something that's $3,000. You know what I'm saying?
I need something
that's $3,000. I need this new camera lens.
Everyone hates, my family hates buying for me because, you know, they know two things. Number one, I don't really care about many material things. And number two, if it is something I want, I just buy it.
Yeah, I know.
I don't
like,
wait.
On the day, on the hour.
Just like, I mean, I didn't tell Lori. I literally was like, I was looking online and some stuff, and all of a sudden I came across a foot massager, you know, these foot massagers.
Dude,
I bought the fucking thing immediately.
Dude, immediately.
I mean, not even like 2 minutes after I saw the ad, I'm like buying it.
And that would have been a perfect Christmas gift. Like, hey, guys, get me
Yeah,
this.
it was like $100. It's like $100, and I mean, it was like, but I was like, I got it. No, so I don't know what.
So the thing that's hard too is that, like, I don't know how old. I'm guessing these are younger people because she's saying, but she's saying girls and guys, not girls and boys. So it could be older. I mean, I like knives. If the guys like knives, I always like, outdoorsy stuff.
Good knife.
Dude, you have
a good knife.
How many times you see me use a knife a day? Quite a bit. I unscrew stuff with it.
73 times a day.
Yeah, dude, I unscrew stuff with it, cut stuff. So sometimes
I saw him stab a lady next door this morning.
Hey, she was a crackhead, and sometimes it comes in handy,
came
bro.
In, she said, "You got a cigarette?" He stabbed her right in
like, get out,
right in the larynx.
Get down on the ground. Yeah, but good luck, and check Amazon. They got tons of little gadgets and stuff.
Yeah. Don't get sucked into the China Instagram things though. That's
what, like the Wish things?
Yeah, just
shit?
whatever.
Dude.
Coming out of China, they get all those gifts that, we bought a little
same size as the screen. Yeah,
we bought a little neck massager. Again, I seem to buy a lot of massage.
You do have you got the Theragun.
Yeah, those things are great.
Dude, that thing
now
is
that
sick.
thing, that's a good.
How much was that thing?
They're like $450.
It's worth it, guys.
It's worth it, man. Again, health, body, mind is important to me.
Logan says, "Hey Brian, I just got into the ball pythons this year. I'm looking to breed my banana ball. What's your favorite mix with bananas?" Ooh, there's a lot.
It's really tough. I always tell people that, like, back in the day when someone said, "Hey, what should I breed a clown to, or what should I breed this to, or what I should breed," there was a relatively limited number of options. And it was like, "Hey, this is a great idea," or "That's a great idea." Now there's a gazillion options out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is. There's
endless. Really,
it's endless. I mean, if you want a darker animal like a black pastel or a cinnamon test, bam, you're there. If you want blackheads, there, bam, it's there. If you want to go, more like the Enchi route, bam, it's there. If you want to go champagne because champagne bananas are pretty cool, bam, it's
Flyers,
there. I mean, it goes forever, and there's no real wrong answers. It's just whatever you want to produce. I always say, breed animals you want to open that drawer every day or open that cage every day and look at, because if you're excited about it, it doesn't matter beyond that, because if you produce a ball python or a corn snake or a leopard gecko or a bearded dragon, if you're passionate about it and love every part, you're going to sell them. They're going to sell.
Yeah, everyone's wanting them right now.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So produce what you want to produce, and there's no wrong answers. Again, in the past, there were right answers and wrong answers. Now there's not. It's just, it doesn't even matter. So just, pick animals that you're like, that's what I want to go for, and then go for it.
Yo, what was that one, though, that we looked at the other day? It had the paradox on it. Was it a black pastel banana?
That was a black pastel banana.
So
That's
breed those, too, because those are dope as shit.
There. I do love the black pastel.
That one was on fire, though. That was
as purple as could be. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I personally, this is just me personally, again, you do what you want to do.
Probably same.
Is I like anything that's dark into banana because the darkness turns purple.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Red Zone Reptiles is back. Says this podcast should be awesome. You're a big inspiration, Brian, in the hobby and business wise. Burning a J for you, Jay. Appreciate you,
well,
man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you, man. I really do. And you know, listen, there's a lot of great people in reptiles, and you know, like I said, rightfully or wrongfully, for a number of years, I was kind of vilified, like I'm a you know, whatever. I want to bring the knowledge that I've created over the last 30 something years and share that knowledge with people. And listen, I'm, you know, whether it's on my vlog or on the podcast, and obviously when we're doing checking in with the family, we're not talking as much about reptiles. When we're doing Been Wondering, maybe we're not talking about reptiles. So this might be a great avenue to talk about those years of experience and try to show people that, number one, I'm not an asshole. Number two, I want to help people. And now I don't have any horse in the race, right? Because, you know, I don't care about, you know, I love breeding reptiles, but I don't care about the money behind it, you know,
or the actual community type thing.
And that's the other thing is, like, you know, before, I'll tell you, you know, let's say when I was breeding reptiles for a living, and that's my sole income, if I did something that pissed somebody off, I would have like, oh my God, now they're going to go tell people not to do business with me, and then BHB isn't going to sell as many animals, and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I don't give a fuck anymore. You know what I mean? Like, literally, if someone's an asshole in the reptile business, I will call them out as an asshole because I know they can't hurt me at all, right? Yep. At all. Now, I'm not going to slander anyone. I'm not going to libel anyone. I'm not going to tell you not to do business with anybody, but I have no fear of retribution from the reptile hobby because I no longer pay my bills from the reptile hobby. And that's just the reality. And the nice thing about that means I can be free. I don't have to sugarcoat anything. I can tell you guys the truth. And I think that hopefully through these podcasts, especially if we do more of these, you'll see the real me and what my intentions are, and hopefully, and I think that it's already happened, that overwhelmingly the hatred / lies that have went around about me have kind of went away because people realize it was all just lies. You know, doesn't mean I'm perfect. God, I'm far from perfect. I make mistakes all the time, but you know, certainly I want people to understand I'm here to help. And really, my only goal in life is to live life, be happy, and make people love these reptiles.
Sweet. Byron says, everyone talks, this is a good question too. Everyone talks how to breed snakes, but no one ever talks about how to start your business selling your snakes. How do you start legit sales of snakes? That's a really good question, because I think a lot of people do it online, you know, so like.
Well, that's the thing. I again, this podcast, so when I look at my notes here, it has a lot to do with this type of question. So it's a great question. And listen, when we started in the late 80s, early 90s, it was difficult because it was all about networking on the phone, going to reptile shows, getting face-to-face with people. Again, I was a long-haired young kid. It was hard to get people to take me seriously. Now, you know, I say look at the whole host of people, Miguel from Always Evolving Pythons, Billy from Mutation Creation, JP Reptiles, Morph Mixology. I mean, you look at all these guys and you look at what they've done. And what they've done is they've created a value in their social media, right? So their value could maybe be, you know, posting amazing animals, you know, sharing information about how to breed them. You know, the list goes on and on. But now it's easier than ever to sell your animals. And by selling them, all you have to do is create an online presence that delivers value for people. And we saw the meteoric rise of some of these guys, you know, Billy and JP and Miguel, and the list goes on, Jason and all these other guys. And that could have never happened 20 years ago. Never, you know? And so that's what you need to do. You need to brand yourself. You need to create content and value in what you put out on the internet. And then people will want to buy and support you. Because the one thing I've learned through this entire journey is that when people feel you're bringing value to their life, whether it's education, entertainment, happiness, positivity, whatever the case is, people want to then support you. And I'm very, very blessed that I have an army of people that support everything we do, whether it's the Reptarium, our swag, buy Ho Ho Drogo merch. Was that plug? Yeah, shoploganpaul.com.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to do. And from a business standpoint, it's easier than ever to do it. Be involved, but be committed. You can't, the one thing on social you can't do, and I see so many people make this mistake, is that they start social, or maybe they even have social on Instagram, let's say, and they don't post for a month, then they post 10 times in a day, and then they don't post for a month. Consistency.
Yeah, save those photos.
Save those photos, stretch them out, be consistent. If you post once a day, once a week, whatever the case is, be consistent, but bring value, bring something why people would want to follow you. And then when they follow you and they think that they're valuable, they're going to then support you, even if they have to pay a little bit more for your product, because they're like, this person has brought value to my life. I want them to continue on. So keep doing that.
Sweet. I got a couple on my phone. So Alyssa says, please keep doing solo podcasts. Love hearing you talk.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Ball Reputation just threw $10 for love.
Well, thank you so much, Ball Reputation.
Scottish Rob said, hey, Brian, are you looking to do anything on the Michigan House Bill HB 6455? Dangerous Reptiles Bill. Best to you and all you guys.
Yeah, so tomorrow's vlog is all about HR 6455. And it's just so very quickly, please watch tomorrow's vlog. You'll hear more about it. It's a bill that is being brought to committee, the Committee of Agriculture of Michigan, that would destroy the future of many reptile keepers. It's definitely a bill I'm praying does not make it out of committee. USARK is involved in it right now, so I'm hoping they are going to work hard on this. I'm going to do my best to do my part. Next week, I'm going to do the best I can do to try to set Zoom meetings up with the representatives on the committee. I would think I would be able to probably get those Zoom meetings, mainly because we have a large contribution to the reptile community in Michigan with the Reptarium. So I would think that they would probably listen to me more than they would some guy that's keeping a venomous cobra in his bedroom. The fact that we have the only reptile zoo in Michigan, and popular one, I would think that they would at least listen to me. Yeah. And my past experience, because I've been involved with HR 669 and other things that were federally, is that most of the time when you get on the phone with a congressman or a senator, whether it's state or federal, they're very level-headed people. Now I think that this Representative Ellison, who is proposing this legislation, is very misinformed. I don't know if he's a bad guy. Don't know. I have no idea. Don't know what kind of intentions he has. I'm assuming what's happening is that he probably had a special interest group, i.e. HSUS, PETA, whatever the case may be, that probably threw some money at him to propose this legislation. What we can hopefully do is kill this in committee, because if you kill it in committee, it doesn't go to the House for a vote, and then
much easier to deal with.
Much easier to deal with 7 or 8 congressmen as opposed to a ton of them. So yeah, we'll see what happens, and it's very, 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 very scary. And not just scary for Michigan. These people, you people that are watching that aren't from Michigan, you may think, it's not my problem. I'm not from Michigan. Trust me. Slippery slope, right? Yeah. I mean, what happens, if you guys don't know, is if Michigan passes a law, typically lots of other states will pass the same law, because they go, oh, look what happened in Michigan. Let's go ahead and because it's the same special interest groups that are giving money to all of these congressmen across the entire country. So if they go, hey, we gave money to this guy in Michigan and it passed, and now this legislation is law, it's called the Dangerous Reptile Act, they will then go to Ohio, and then they will go to Illinois, and then they'll go to New York, and then they'll go to Connecticut, and that's what happens. So definitely, I fight for everyone's rights, whether it's in Florida or California or whatever, and we as a community have to fight for the rights in Michigan, because it could be damaging and really destroy the future of the hobby, and quite frankly, the future plans for the Reptarium. The Reptarium could survive as it is now, but we might not be able to get animals we want to get in the future because of this act. So let's pray that we kill it.
Alex Breezy says, "Hey, Brian and Jay, love the solo podcast today. Money for snakes, weed, and wine for Lori."
Snakes, weed, and wine for Lori?
Yeah, this sounds
okay. So I'm going to
she's
say
lucking out.
Snakes for me, weed for Lori, or weed for Jay, and wine for Lori.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Yes, yeah, and then we got to start the crack fund.
Yeah, where's
soon.
the crack fund for Deacon?
Yeah, for Deacon crack. Yes.
Ball Reputation threw another $5 just for love.
Thank you so much, man.
Jacob Harrington said, "Last breeding season, you produced a Suma ball."
Yes.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Suma
you're
het
right.
pied.
You're right.
Suma het pied. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. And it said, sorry, one more time. How is that one doing? Do you plan on producing more of this next year? I'd love to get one, and they're my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, we have the potential for some more Sumas. We also have the potential for some Suma pieds.
Hell yeah, dude.
And I'm a little bit behind. Listen, like I said, I could go out and buy animals that could make a Suma pied much quicker than the way I'm going about it, breeding, mahogany hat to mahogany hat. I'm doing it for fun.
It's kind of fun to do it and see if you could hit the odds.
Yeah, I'm doing it for fun now. I'm not doing it like I'm not. I was when I was talking to when I was on MJ's podcast with Justin Kabelka and Ozzy, I told him, I said, you guys are almost convincing me to get back in the game.
Dude,
because
it's
exciting hearing about all these new projects and this new this and this new. But that's never going to happen. I'm not getting back in the game. I will continue to produce cool animals. I'll continue to work really cool projects. I think that we probably produced more cutting edge ball pythons this year than people give us credit for.
Oh, dude, I mean, much cool shit.
Yeah, we produced a lot of world's first this year, but I don't think people even think that. I think that now, if people said, "Hey, who's the top 25 ball python breeders?" I don't think there's any way that I make that top 25 list, even though we produced 183 clutches or whatever it was, and a lot of really cutting edge stuff. But we're definitely not on the same level as Miguel or Justin Kabelka or Ozzy or many of these, Billy from Mutation Creation. We're not on that level. And I never want to be on that level again. But we're going to play around. We'll shock some people every now and then. I can promise you that.
Love it.
Cause we still have some pretty cool animals that are, churning around here that are fun and we'll just keep on playing.
Martin says, "Is Ultramel the same as Candy?" Really curious.
Not at all. Not even close.
Cool.
Not even close. Completely different. I mean, so you could say is Candy and what is it? Toffee. I'm sorry. So it's Candy and Toffee the same? Pretty close. You could probably say Candy and Toffee are the same. Ultramel is much more, it's a recessive number one, and it's much more like caramel albino than it is Toffee or
Candy.
And it's Candy and Toffee are both allelic to albino. They're also recessive, but they are allelic to albino. Ultramel is not allelic to albino, and it's recessive on its own. But it looks like a cooler version of a caramel albino that doesn't appear to be linked to kinking. Although I know some people have produced a few Ultramel kinks. I've never produced an Ultramel kink. And with caramels, you definitely produce a high percentage of kinking. It's something that's just, it's in the genetics of caramel albino.
Amber asks, "How can I help my ball python with her stuck eye caps? She sheds, but eyes still look strange. Humidity checked, substrate, and eating well."
So it's a really tricky thing because there's a difference between an eye crinkle and an eye cap.
Yes.
And if you have an eye crinkle and you try to remove that eye crinkle, you will destroy the snake's eyes and it will go blind. So number one, you got to make sure it is an eye cap and not an eye crinkle. If it is an eye cap, the best way to go is you get those rubber thumbs that you can buy at Office Max or any other place. That those rubber thumbs
you would use
are,
for using a
counting,
paper,
for
money.
counting money, and you just gently go from the front of their mouth to the back, and it just sticks to the cap, and you can peel it off really easily. But don't pry off a cap. Even if it's a cap, you can damage the eye. And you
are dealing with an eye. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, and there are a lot of times people come to me and say they have an eye cap and it's an eye crinkle. So just be aware of that. But yeah.
Right. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. And then I've got a bunch of other stuff to talk about too. So you want to take a break from these, or do you want to keep?
Let me hit a couple more.
Okay, we'll hit a couple
quick.
more, and then we'll get moving on to some other stuff.
Ball Reputation said, "What would you say to someone trying to make it in ball pythons?" You kind of did go over that.
Yeah, but I think it's just to reiterate, I think pick projects you really like. think out. Don't think one generation, think 5 generations. What do you want to do from here? I mean, sit down on a piece of paper, say, okay, I want to take this to this, and
That's what Brian does.
When I raise up, I want to go this to this, and then think years ahead, and think what projects would be cool maybe down the road. Justin Kabelika did a great job, and it sounds to me, and this is I could be completely wrong, so don't quote me on this. I'm just telling you my opinion. Justin mentioned that he felt that there was now a changing about to happen in the reptile ball python world. And I don't think he meant, I think the market is better than it's ever been. It's amazing. I am shocked at how good the ball python market is because I thought it was going to die off. I think it's had a resurgence. I think that it's really in great shape. So I think it's never too late to get into ball pythons. I think now is just as good of a time as any. This is what I think Justin might have been saying. And again, I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm sorry if I am. I think there's a chance that clown ball pythons may be not the primary interest in the future of ball pythons. Clowns will definitely still be very popular, but my problem I have is that right now you have all of the main players in ball pythons crushing clown morphs.
Yeah. I mean, that's the number one thing right now. At some point,
you're going to run out of it, right? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be like, I'm not saying clowns are going to go away. Clowns are going to be great for a long time. They're recessive. They're beautiful. They have proof of it. Amazing. And I'm just thinking maybe Justin is saying, he didn't say this. He didn't tell me this. I'm totally just coming up with my own hypothesis here, is that I'm wondering, is he thinking that, all right, we've went down the road pretty far with clowns. We're going to continue to go down that road, but now let's cultivate the next clown ball python. What's after clown ball pythons? I don't know what that is. I don't know anything about it. I'm just saying, I'm wondering what he said, that I think that there's a changing of the future of projects. I'm wondering if he's maybe saying that because, again, you know, so many people are producing they're all producing almost the same clown, right? Gothams and Batmans and you know, stranger clowns and this and that. And at some point, you know, you go, all right, well, everyone's kind of already done all of it. So now where do we go with that project? I think there has to be a next, like a replacement to the clowns. Not saying that clowns are going to go away because they're still going to be really popular, but what's the next wave that the big dogs, because again, once the big dogs are producing the same as the next tier, they're no longer big dogs, right?
That's right.
So they have to be the next tier. So when everyone else is producing Batman, they're producing the next thing. And eventually you run out of things with clowns. They're saying, I can't do it anymore. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not what Justin was saying because he didn't say it. Maybe he's just saying like the next, maybe clown will be part of his next journey, but now maybe going in a completely different direction. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. I'm just saying that he said it, and Justin's a very intelligent guy.
Well, you could be right, because it could be like, you know how typically with clowns, people are trying to get like the thinnest stripe,
right?
Jagged stripe. Like maybe there's another way. You go the other way and try to get stripes that are thicker and more black and stuff like that.
It's certainly possible. And again, he's a smart guy, so I know he's thinking what's going to happen 2, 3, 4 years from now. He's not just thinking about 2021. He's thinking about 2026.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see. And that's the other thing I would say is honestly, follow guys like his lead. Right? If you start to see a shift, follow that shift, because that shift is going to be pretty important in the future.
Damn hot tips, dude. Roberta said, love the solo podcast. She wants to get a female to breed with her banana butter Enchi that she bought from BHB. She's learned so much from watching you.
Yeah, please do. Awesome. You know, please get something. I think you'll be amazing. That's a really beautiful animal, by the way.
Sick,
I mean, butter Enchi, lesser Enchi, and then you put the banana in it. It's amazing. So, so much potential. Gosh, there's so many things you could do with that animal. So, thank you for your support.
Stephanie said, what's the number one thing on your Christmas list, Brian?
You know, everyone's asked me that, and this is what I've said. I want a happy, family and friend-filled, anxiety-free Christmas.
That sounds beautiful,
That's
man.
it. Period. Nothing else on my list. I don't need a material thing. I don't need a gift. I don't need to open up anything. I just want to be happy. I want to be around the people I love, and I want to not have anxiety. And I think I will. Most days I have little anxiety now.
Yeah, little to none sometimes.
Little to none. So, and we'll talk about that in future podcasts. I won't get into it too much tonight because we're talking snakes and stuff like that. But I think there's some messages out there. I'm very passionate about mental health. And listen, you don't go through the pain that I went through for 6 months. And trust me, it was unbelievable pain for 6 months.
For sure.
Every minute of every day, 24 hours a day of pain. You don't do that and not want to help other people. And if you do, then you're an asshole.
Yep.
And so I've got a lot to say there, but we won't talk about that right now.
Flat Mountain Pythons said Michaels has wrapping paper on sale that has the cutest sloths on it. Bought it in honor of you, Brian.
Oh, love it. We've been getting so much sloth stuff, haven't we?
I mean, for the last year though.
My gosh,
like,
I love it.
So much.
Today we had a tour in the house, and did you see the blanket?
No, I just got here before. Yeah,
my gosh, they gave me this sloth blanket that is the cutest.
You
little
cuddling
sloth.
up in it tonight?
Oh my gosh. As a matter of fact, I told Lori, I said maybe we should give it to Drogo, and she's like, no way, this thing is too cool. So So we're taking it home. So,
hell yeah.
Yeah. So. All right, let's do one more super chat, and we're going to catch up on all the super chats. So hang tight with us, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to keep them in my phone so they don't
We're going to
disappear.
keep going, but let's do one more, and then let's talk about some other stuff.
Stephanie came back and said, my boys showed me your video on VAT-19. Have you ever thought about doing similar things on the podcast? Love what you do.
Ooh, interesting. Yes and no. I mean, I think it's not a bad idea to have maybe a checking in podcast where we do silly things like that. 19. I think that may bring it to the next level there. And I think that's the thing, guys, right? So we're going to talk business for a second here, and we'll get back to snakes in a minute. I everything I do, I want to do because it's exciting, it's fun, it's innovative. I always want to be on the cutting edge. I always want to be on I don't want to really be a follower that much. I mean, I follow people and I take inspiration from people, but I also want to try to push things, right? So the podcast, I don't know that you guys understand, and Jay certainly does, how much I believe in this podcast going forward. We are nowhere where we need to be.
For sure.
We have to be 10 times larger than what we are now to get to where I feel we need to be. Can we get there? I believe we can.
I do too.
Will we get there? I don't know. You guys will be a big part of that.
Yeah, you guys got to keep sharing, keep loving, keep liking.
But you got to remember that we've only started this less than a year ago and really only got serious over the last few months. So I think that we're much like snake bites and animal bites and now the vlog. We're going to look back and think how horrible we were. You know what I mean? We're going to be like, we were horrible at the
amateurs,
podcasting game.
Yeah.
And so I think that we will evolve, and maybe these solo podcasts will be something that I didn't even think about prior to today. Today was the first day I thought about doing a solo podcast. Well, solo with me and Jay. So that may be part of the future. Been wondering, which is the one with the guests that are not reptile and animal based, that may evolve. It may or may not evolve. I think that's the one that, in my opinion, has the largest potential for growth. Maybe I'm wrong. Checking in maybe needs to evolve, right? Maybe checking in does become more VAT-19-ish.
It's not a bad idea.
And so, yes. So we're going to evolve. But podcasting to me, I'm not, one thing I believe in business, whether you're breeding snakes, whether you're whatever you happen to be doing, I think that you don't give up, right? And if you look at my career, there were probably 100 times in snake breeding, in YouTube, in everything that I've done, there was 100 times that any sane person would have given up.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And I think that's the same way I feel about podcasting. I feel we are going to be successful. I feel podcasting will be a huge part of our future, and it will be as successful as our vlog and everything else we do. Will it? I don't know, but I believe it can be, and that's what I'm going to do. But it will evolve over the time for sure.
Yeah, and it will get there because we're going to work our ass off to make it happen.
It will, yeah. So back to reptiles a little bit.
You got it.
I think that one of the things that people don't understand too is like, well, when you're developing a plan for breeding reptiles as a career, second side hustle, whatever the case is that you have to come up with a pretty good plan. The more you plan, the better the chances are you're going to succeed. And the harder you work at it, obviously, that goes without saying. But also be willing to adapt too, right? You know, you don't want to write this big business plan out and then you get a year into it and things aren't working and you aren't willing to adapt. I mean, one of the things that we've done throughout our entire career is adapt constantly, you know, whether it was with snakes or Reptarium or the vlog, or, you know, obviously snake bites was one thing we adapted to the vlog. Now we're, you know, the vlog, and now we're adapting a little bit to podcasting. I'm not saying any of the other things are going to go away, but I'm just saying that, you know, we're always in this constant state of adaptation.
Flux, yeah.
And so, you know, keep that into mind. And then, you know, also, you know, like think about things like I talk about scaling with ball pythons, or I shouldn't say ball pythons, I should say reptile breeding, is that if you want to scale and scale just means growth, right? If you want to grow your business, you have to understand that, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier in the podcast with gross and net, right? BHB was the perfect example of how scaling sometimes doesn't work. We got to the point where we were grossing a few $1 million a year and barely making money because we had scaled to the point where our overhead was so high, it was so intrusive that it was, you know, I had to wake up June 1st and make $60,000 by June 30th to be broke. You know, and that was that's a hard thing to deal with, right? I mean, you know, whereas, you know, Miguel, my good friend from Always Evolving Pythons, you know, has a great little outbuilding in his backyard that has an amazing collection of ball pythons. And a couple times, and again, I don't know what he makes his own decisions. I'm just a friend of him giving his advice. A couple times he said like, hey, I've thought about, you know, buying a bigger building and I can double or triple my collection. And my advice has always been, don't do that. You know, right now you've got it going on. You've got, you know, Jesse, his brother, is his main employee. And he might have some part-time help here and there, but for the most part, he's got one employee. He's got rodents. He's got, you know, no rental building because it's out back. He's got some electricity, but he's crushing it on the net side of things, right? Because the gross, it might not be as much as if he grew 3 times, but the net may be more where he's at now. Well, not probably, most likely his net will be more now in his backyard than he will if he scales to a large level. So the only way you can scale a reptile collection effectively is if you're going to then sell an enormous amount more animals. So like, let me just say, if you produced 10 clutches of ball pythons and you made 20 grand, you can't produce 100 clutches and make 200 grand. It's just not going to happen. You're going to produce 100 clutches and you're going to make, instead of 20, you're going to make 35 or 40 grand. You know, so you're 10 times the work for maybe twice the money, right? And so these are the things you have to keep in mind. It can work, you know. I mean, you've got the Bells at Reptile Industry, you've got the Max at Reptiles by Mac, you've got the Gourmet Rodent with Mike Lehman, you've got Triple L, you've got you know, Underground Reptiles. Some of those are more wholesalers than they are breeders, but they all do a little of both. And what their business models have been to sell to thousands of customers on a huge level. So every day they have to ship out, you know, 250 boxes of reptiles. And you have to ask yourself, is that the life you want? Now with me, with BHB, what happened was we scaled and we got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden I was no longer attached to any of the animals, because I'm not going to lie to you. And this was a big part of why I downsized, was that there were times where I would walk into a room and literally didn't know I had an animal. I'd be like, oh my God, that thing is beautiful, man. When did we get that? And they'd be like, oh, well, we had that for 6 months. And I had never seen it.
Crazy.
Never even seen it. And that's when I knew this isn't for me, man. This isn't why I'm doing this, man. I want to be able to walk and know every single animal in my collection.
And you do.
And we do.
Yeah.
Even though we have a lot of snakes and a lot of reptiles, we still know everything.
We know where everything is at any given chance,
yep,
moment.
Anytime, man. We love it. We look forward to it. I remember when a female lays eggs for the first time, I'm like, I remember when we hatched that. Or I remember when I bought that animal. And that wasn't the case when we scaled bigger. And that's what you have to decide. I'm not saying it's not wrong. It's not. You could definitely
But is that for you?
Is that for you? Is that your reason? Are you wanting to produce? Listen, Mike Lehman runs the Gourmet Rodent, but Bill Brandt is who grew the Gourmet Rodent and then ultimately sold it to Mike Lehman. They supply all of Petco. And then we're not going to get into whether Petco and PetSmart are good or not. Maybe we'll get into that at some other time. I have probably opinions about that are some people would agree with and some people won't. So we won't talk about that at this moment. But Bill Brandt really did look. Bill Brandt was another mentor of mine, mainly on the business side, not so much on the reptile side. And he's an amazing, amazing person. Still is. He's retired now, but he's still an amazing person. Probably one of the smartest businessmen to ever have worked in the reptile world. But although he was a diehard reptile guy, because he'd been breeding and keeping reptiles since the 70s, but the truth is he was really about the business. What drove him, what gets me up in the morning is spending time with these reptiles, teaching and educating people about these reptiles. What got Bill up in the morning was growing his business and making money and making widgets. Widgets didn't matter if they were leopard geckos, corn snakes, or ball pythons. They were widgets. They were numbers. They were a spreadsheet, and that was good for him. He loved it. He thrived in it. That was what he wanted to do. Is it what you want to do? It's not what I want to do. As a matter of fact, Bill Brandt came to my collection back about 8 years ago. He was supplying Petco. He was doing about $8 million a year with Petco, on top of other things. The Max and the Bells were mainly supplying PetSmart, and that was pretty much it. And he came to my collection. This is when we still had the big, 20,000 square foot building full of snakes, producing literally tens of thousands of baby snakes a year. And Bill came in and he said, listen, there's 3 major collections in the country right now supplying the big, box chains. And again, that was the Max, the Bells, and the Gourmet Rodent. And he said, you're the only person that has the infrastructure to be the number 4. You're the only guy. You have it all here. You can slide into it right now. They have a demand issue or supply issue because the demand is too high. We can't supply them with the demand that they want, the supply that they want, and you're slated to do it. And I looked at it and I said, fuck that, man.
Yeah, dude.
Not interested in that. Not interested in that. Not interested in that. And I went the other way and we sold off 3/4 of our collection or 60% of our collection. Because it just wasn't something I was interested in. I didn't want that. I didn't want to produce widgets. I wanted to produce baby animals that I loved and that I was sending to people. And that was why we stopped wholesaling animals. We no longer wholesale. We sell to the end user, and we call every single person, and we have a personal relationship with every single customer that we have. And that's what made me happy in the reptile breeding game. But that doesn't necessarily mean it makes you happy. I'm saying what made me happy.
Definitely makes you tear up a little, though.
You have to decide what you want to do, not what I want to do, But I want to share these experiences with you so that as you're thinking of, maybe breeding reptiles, maybe you're thinking about the side hustle, and we will get into, maybe not tonight, but in the future, solo ones, we'll get into, the reptarium. If you want to start a reptile zoo, what you're looking at. We learned a lot in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot in the last 2 years. I remember Jay from Prehistoric Pets told me when I first started opening up the reptarium, he said, you're going to learn a lot about, or you're going to learn a lot about what you don't think you need to know running a reptile zoo. And I'll be totally honest with you, we've learned a ton. I think I was better prepared than he thought I was, to be totally honest with you. I really do think I was better prepared than he thought I was. But we did learn a lot, and I'll share that with you because maybe you aren't interested in breeding reptiles, but maybe you're interested in maybe going down the educational route. Maybe you're interested in going down the reptile zoo chain, and there's opportunities all the way across the border. So we'll cover that. But right now we're talking mainly breeding snakes and breeding reptiles and stuff like that. Let's hit a couple supers, man.
All right, we got let me see. Amanda Arnett, she threw $5 just for love. No comment.
Thank you.
Timothy Lesher said, do you have any tips or advice establishing mangroves? Thanks in advance. Yes.
So, it's much like I talked about earlier in the podcast about dragon snakes and mandarin rat snakes. I don't like wild-caught mangroves, A lot of them die. Not as many as the dragon snakes and not as many as the mandarins, but a large portion of mangrove snakes that come into the country don't do well. again, better success rate. Probably if 100% of dragon snakes die and 98% of mandarins die, 60 to 70% of mangroves die, right? So much better success rate than the other two. But that's still a lot of mangrove snakes that are dying, right? So, and I realize it's very hard to find captive mangroves. I'm one of the very few people that over the last 3 years have produced mangrove snakes, and we've kept almost every single one of them. Yeah. But I would still encourage you to try to find captives, even if it goes back to what I was saying about not chasing, being patient. Because if you get captive ones, they're going to crush for you. They're going to be amazing for you. And if you get wild ones, you're going to have a lot of heartache. That's just my opinion. And that's the way I think you should go about it.
Ryan Hill says, are you going to do Venom Hunters again? I loved watching you and Chewy catch those top hands.
Well, a couple things about that. One, I had a great time on Venom Hunters. Created a tremendous amount of hatred for me because people couldn't separate the fact that it was just a TV show, right? I mean, TV is TV, and people, and I understand, I mean, they painted me in Venom Hunters as like a guy that wanted to become a big name in the Venom business. So, of course, a bunch of the people in the Venom business then took ire to that, like, that mother effer is trying to take our business. I was never going to become a Venom guy. I wasn't interested in that world. It was for TV. Had a great time. It was never my decision whether I was going to do more Venom Hunters. It was the network's decision. And we had decent ratings. Get into, Nielsen ratings are a little bit complicated, but nevertheless, we were shooting at about a 0.2 in the Nielsen ratings, which means that we were top 20. But on Discovery, top 20 isn't always good enough. It's right in the middle. We were when they decided not to renew the series, it was literally, they said that you guys were on the bubble. They're like, you're on the bubble. I mean, we could go either way with this. And they decided to not go forward with it. So it wasn't my decision to not do Venom Hunters. I am glad that we didn't do Venom Hunters, quite frankly, because, like I said, the hatred that came with it, number one, was really troubling. Number two, I had a fun time, but I was about done with that world, right?
Yeah.
The only way I would do television again, I shouldn't say never, but I don't think I would ever do television again. The only television show I would do again would be on my family business. So if there was a television opportunity that was about my family business with reptiles, I would consider doing a TV show. Every other TV show, and I've been offered a lot of shows in the last 2 or 3 years. I turn every one of them down. I just say, no, I'm not interested. And that doesn't mean that maybe the right show comes up and I go, wow, that sounds like a blast. I'm going to do it. So I never say never, but I don't see myself doing television unless a network says, why don't we do a family business on or family show on his business, his reptarium, his family, his crew. Which I personally think would be a fucking hit.
Dude, it'd be so funny, dude.
I don't mean to be arrogant. I just think that we have a really interesting life.
And there's so much shit that goes on that, for TV is just perfect. I mean, even like Salt and Pepper's Tank, like that's hysterical on a TV show, right?
Well, and we have an interesting family dynamic. Obviously, Lori and me have an interesting relationship compared to most husbands and wives, and lots of other things go on. I mean, and if there was a crew there that was really capturing the essence of what we do here, I do think it'd be a hit. Will it happen? I don't know, and it's not up to me to choose. Has there been some talks lately about it? There's a possibility that there's been some talks, but again, it's not up to me. And there's a lot of the talks that have happened with some networks recently. We're a long way off. Let's just put it that way.
Scottish Robs came back and said, as a mod for the Reptile Keepers for Brian Barczyk page, trying to get members to email about how it would be detriment to tourism dollars for the state bill to pass.
Yeah, I think...
Be cordial, please.
Just be really...
Everybody.
And by the way, thank you for the Reptile Keepers for Brian Barczyk page. Thanks for everyone that's on there. And yes, we could use all your emails and calls and stuff. Just be cordial. Understand that, what's the saying? You can get more bees with honey than
vinegar.
Than vinegar. just keep that in mind. And but yes, if we flood the committee with emails.
And that's so true, though. I mean, like the amount of tourism that the Reptarian brings in is ridiculous weekly. You know.
Yeah, we're up. You know that we're up for the. I sent you an email? We're up. For
I didn't see it until today, though.
Yeah, I
just seen it.
That's okay. It didn't matter. We're good. We're good. Because I was going to tell you about that. I kind of misread the email, anyways. But we're up for the Macomb County Business of the Year.
Dude, I'm so happy for you, man. So I seen it, and I was like, no way, dude.
So we were nominated by the mayor, but now we're finalists. So there's just a few businesses. So we're one.
Who do we got to go burn down, dude?
Yeah, we're gonna go kick.
They're not a business if it's on fire.
Hey, Reptile Keepers for Brian Barczyk, go over there with some pickets.
Yeah, there you go, dude. We'll get this going.
No. But it's an honor, and I don't know if we'll win or not. But yeah. So,
that jeweler guy, Mike, said, "Sup, guys? Hope everyone is doing well."
Hope you are too, Mike. Thanks for always supporting us, brother. I appreciate you, man.
And Let Roses Burn said, another podcast tomorrow, maybe? Sweet.
Oh, shit, man. Come on now. We got to have God rests on Sunday. You know that, right?
Somebody's got to do it.
God said we have to rest. Not saying I'm God. That sounded really arrogant.
No. You're right, though. That's what we're supposed to do.
I'm just saying we're supposed to rest on Sunday. Although we won't be resting, but I don't think we'll be podcasting. But that being said, I don't think that it's completely out of the realm of possibility that down the road, not this week or next month or 3 months from now, but down the road, I could see us doing 5, 6, 7 podcasts a week. I really could see us doing a podcast.
Yeah, if we had the traction that we're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I said, we have to be 10 times the size we are now to make it worthwhile, because the amount of energy, effort, and stuff that goes into everything to do with it. We have, you got to, I always talk about mental bandwidth. And there's only so much mental bandwidth. So if we were to podcast 7 days a week, something else would have to give.
Right.
We couldn't just add 7 podcasts a week on top of everything else we're doing now, because we would all die.
Short answer for you.
Yeah.
Tyler King said, will you go over bread lie?
I don't know exactly what that means, other than the fact that breadlie are obviously Centralian carpet pythons.
They're one of my favorite snakes,
and they're absolutely amazing snakes. They're probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, carpet python. They're obviously from Central Australia, and they're one of the larger carpet pythons. They can get 9, 10 foot. Typically very docile. Some of the Australian ones that they have, like some of the hypomelanistic ones, are ridiculous.
What?
Absolutely. We don't have any here that I'm aware of. There was some stonewash Brettles for a while. I don't know what happened. We had one. We produced a few of them, then we sold them when we downsized. And I don't know if anyone else is producing them. I'm a little out of the game on the carpet python side, so I'm assuming they're still stonewashed Brettles.
That sounds sick.
Yeah, and I know that some of the guys down, like Joe Ball down in Australia, was producing albino Darwin Brettles crosses. And some people, the carpet python industry doesn't seem to be as finicky.
Crazy as a green tree and stuff.
Yeah, it's finicky about the integration of subspecies. But those albino, as a matter of fact, can you pull up albino Brettles carpet python or albino Centralian carpet python?
Yeah.
You guys have to see these, because they are absolutely ridiculous. And it's something, I haven't even started the project, but it is something I'd like to start, to be honest with you. Again, just for my personal opinion. The second picture you can hit. Second picture, yeah, look at that. So the bottom one is the albino Brettles, and the top one is the albino Darwins.
I mean, this is so much more next level, dude.
Yeah,
That's crazy. It's like lipstick. It's nuts.
Ridiculous, yeah. So, and that, I'm sure this is Joe Ball's picture right here. I'm positive of it, which is a blue tongue skinks Australia.
Or blue tongue lizard.
Yeah, blue tongue. Yeah, they call them lizards there. Yeah, that's Joe Ball. So it's absolutely beautiful. So
I've never even seen that before. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's great. So
Ball Reputation asks, what do you think of the cinder gene?
It's been around for a long time. It's another dark morph animal. I think it's interesting, because I like the dark morph stuff. I think right now in the dark morph, you obviously have cinder, you have black pastel, cinnamon pastel, you have blackheads. Now, stranger gene is kind of in there, mahogany is in there. And I think any one of those have interest. You know, Cinder might be interesting because it probably hasn't been put into as much stuff as the other genes. Yeah. So it may react differently. So if you're working with them, you know, start chunking it into, you know, clowns and
random stuff.
And the stuff that you're seeing that goes really well with Blackhead, Cinnamon, Black Pastel, and Stranger Mahogany. Plug that Cinder into that stuff because that's going to give you something probably similar, maybe better, or maybe not. It's hard to say.
Landon McCabe says, how do I get my stubborn lavender cow king to transition from lizards to mice? Your channel is inspiring to all. Keep up the great work.
Wow, that's interesting.
Tricky problem.
I don't know that I've ever had a cow king that doesn't eat rodents. You know, certainly if you haven't tried scented yet, try scented. Move, you know, right? I mean, so take a lizard. If you can find a frozen lizard, what you want to do is just thaw it out a little bit. I know it sounds gross, but you just take a razor blade, you open the guts up, and you literally roll a pinky or fuzzy or whatever size, you know, meal that cow king could eat. You roll it in the guts of that frozen thawed animal, and that's often how we get animals that are, say, snake eaters over to pinkies and lizard eaters over to pinkies and stuff like that. So it's a good trick. If you haven't tried that yet, give that a shot, and that oftentimes works. The other thing you can do, of course, is the choo-choo train, where, you know, as it's finishing the lizard, you just choo-choo train right, you know,
that's smart,
the rodent right behind it, and then they get that rodent thing, and oftentimes after 2, 3, 4 times, they'll switch over.
Amy says, thank you for being such a consistent ambassador for reptiles from Ohio.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, if I am nothing else, I'm consistent. I might be a consistent asshole. I might be a consistent,
no way.
You know, whatever, but I am definitely consistent. I mean, I've lived my life very consistently. And
like that time you went like on a, what was it, like a few week binge of eating like bologna sandwiches or something?
I think it was 13 days bologna sandwiches alone. And I did.
And that means, does that mean every meal?
Every meal.
Every meal.
Yeah.
Only thing you ate.
And I did 10 days only eating corn.
Yeah. And then was there hot dogs too? Did a hot dog
No, I don't think I did hot dogs.
Or was it eggs or something? There was something else, right?
Yeah, I get on these kicks. I'm actually going to get back on a health kick here. I just weighed myself. I gained like 8 pounds since we left on our trip.
Yeah, you think so, dude?
Yeah, and just
beef jerky only?
between the trip and then back home, Lori's cooked some beautiful cookies.
I heard about you destroying the cookie jar,
I was just destroying. So today I realized, oh shit, guys, if you guys don't know, I lost almost 30 pounds in the last several months, and I just gained 8 of them back. So I am back on the run. I'm going to drop these. I actually want to drop about 12 pounds. My target weight, I actually hit my target weight, but I still wasn't quite happy. So I wanted to do about 4 more pounds beyond that. So so I'll consistently be
getting some slim, get some cut. Let Rose Bird said, sorry. So what she thought we said, and probably we did say, is we said that the vlog tomorrow was going to be about the bill, but we probably said podcast on accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Yes. So tomorrow's vlog will be all on HR 6544, which is the Dangerous Reptile Act that is being proposed in the Committee for Agriculture in Michigan. And it was brought to the light in December 1st. Not sure when the committee is actually going to be held, but I'm assuming that's going to happen probably before Christmas, maybe right after the first of the year.
Heather said, I would so watch a TV show about you guys. You are amazing. Love you all. You have so got me through some tough times.
Well, thank you.
Vice versa.
Thank you, Heather. And TV's interesting because I won't get into it, so I'm going to lose half the people here because I'm passionate about entertainment as well. And it's when we were on Discovery Channel, or when I was on Discovery with Venom Hunters, that the everyone at Discovery Channel knew me very well. And they said that they had never had anyone ever on their network like me, because I was like so
about that shit.
I was just like, and the rumor was, I mean, the joke going around the office was that I would one day run the PR for Discovery Channel because I was so adamant about their production or their promotion of things, and they were fantastic. They still are fantastic. As a matter of fact, one of the networks that we've talked with recently was Discovery because, and the reason they wanted to even talk about it was because of my past relationship with them. They, here even 4 years after Venom Hunters, apparently my name is still synonymous at Discovery's communications. And I can probably tell you that I know one thing quick little anecdotal story for you guys. I was the person that was responsible for changing their email system.
What do you mean?
And so
bro?
so listen, Discovery Channel, Discovery Communications, pretty large company. You know, they own
they own
probably a few $100 million at least, maybe more than that. And interestingly enough, every single person at the network's email was their first name, last initial at discovery.com. That was it. It's like Sarah B at discoverynetwork.com or discovery.com. On and on and on. Well, at the time, the president, the GM of Discovery Communications was a guy named Rick Ross. And so at the end, when they did not renew, I emailed Rick R at discovery.com. And I said, hey, thank you, Rick, for letting me be on your network. It was an amazing experience. Sorry it didn't work out better. Within 20 minutes, I get an email back from the president of Discovery Communications saying, thank you so much, Brian. We loved your work here. We hope we can work with you again. 15 minutes later, I got a phone call from head of talent at Discovery saying, how did you get Rick's email?
Oh, my God.
And I said, well, it's pretty easy to figure out, isn't it?
I
said, every single person has the first and last name. So immediately thereafter, everyone's emails were changed.
You're for real?
I swear to God,
that's so
damn
funny, bro.
Yeah, I swear to God, that's what happened. So, I think, I mean, I think I know entertainment pretty well. I'm a student of it, and I really have said this from the beginning. If you get a show that is not full of bullshit and fake reality, just the real reality of our daily life here and what we're going to do, and in particular, the show we're talking about is expanding the zoo, and that journey. I think that there's no doubt it would be a hit. Not because of me. As a matter of fact, I've said this, and even when I've talked to some of the production people recently, I've said this, and I'm probably talking way out of I should probably not be telling you as much as I am right now, but I do that. I've said, really, the show's success is predicated on Lori, not anybody else. Because Lori is a very interesting character. Good, bad, or ugly, whatever you want to call it. She's the most interesting person, I think.
She's real as fuck.
She's real. She's going to bring it every time, and she's going to always be as real as you possibly can be, and that's just the way it is. And I think that Lori will be the most popular person on that show. And I've seriously said that. And so listen. And I'm going to wrap up my TV stuff with this, and then we'll move back onto reptiles. Is that I've always said, and I told Discovery this when they did. So there was a character on Venom Hunters named Tim Fitzer. I'm calling it out. Fuck it. And people hated him. I mean, all I ever heard, everywhere I went, every promotion I did, was people saying, I cannot stand that Tim Fitzer guy. And so I went to Discovery Communications head office in LA. They had me out after they said they weren't going to renew because they did want it. They said, hey, listen, we want to do something with you, Brian. We just don't know what it's going to be. So they had me out. We talked. We met everybody. And what I told them is the same thing that I'm telling you right now, is that you want to create an emotion when you're in entertainment, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Discovery Channel. And that emotion needs to be a couple things. It either needs to be, man, I would love to just go and have a beer with that person and chit chat. Seems like a really cool guy, i.e. Mike Rowe, right? Wouldn't anyone want to go hang out with Mike Rowe?
No, I agree.
From Dirty Jobs or now whatever he does. Josh Gates would be another person that would do that. Or you want to have someone punch you in your fucking face. You want to be like that, the Kardashians. You name it. Like, I hate those people. Jersey Shore. How many people? I'd like to kill them. You are creating an emotion. Now, with the emotion you don't want to create is either no emotion, like, we're all right, but I don't like them or dislike them. Not a good emotion. Or the next emotion you don't want to create is, I want to turn the channel.
Yup. Boring.
And Tim Fitzer you wanted to turn the channel. You didn't want to punch him. You just didn't want to see him again. You didn't want to hear the voice. You just wanted him off your TV screen. Now, if he was a complete asshole. So my point is that not that Lori's a terrible person. I think that the fact is that because she says what she says, there are going to be people that love her. How many times, Jay, do we hear,
Lori,
my spirit animal.
Yeah.
Lori, you're my spirit animal. So people are going to love her, and then there's going to be other people that are going to be like, she is a bitch, right? But she's going to create an emotion either way.
No, I agree with you, dude. Because like that's the thing is it's what makes you stick around, right? Because I'm going to think about you after that show's off, whether it's like you said, oh yeah, I really like that person, or I can't even believe I just watched what I just watched. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the one thing you want to do is never be like
I want to go on TikTok.
Yeah, I'd rather be watching someone get executed than watch the show. So anyways, back to some. Do you have any more super chats?
Just one.
Let's hit this one and then I'll go back to a couple topics.
Kermit said, "Hey Brian, just got a beautiful pair of yellow eyelash vipers after a year-long mentorship. Yeah, love what you guys do and would love to visit the zoo."
Well, I hope you can come and visit.
Bring those vipers, dude.
I love eyelash vipers. I mean, temple vipers, eyelash vipers. They're all just absolutely amazing. I don't see myself keeping them at this time or in the near future. I'm not going to say I'm never going to keep venomous. I've worked with venomous on and off since I was 15, 16. But I don't, this is the thing. You got to always be willing to die on a hill, right?
Yep.
And the one hill I'm not willing to die on is
Venom Hill.
The Venom Hill with Lori. Lori is so opposed to them. I know I can get a sloth. I know I can get a Komodo dragon. I know I can do some things. Venomous is not going to happen, and I'm not going to die on that hill. So I'll appreciate it, and I get to go around and mess with other people's venomous snakes, and I love them to death. One day, maybe the Reptarium has venomous, but if it's up to HR Bill 6455, we will not be able to keep them, period. They'll be gone. There's no venomous snakes in the state of Michigan are going to be able to be had, except for grandfather clause one. You won't be able to breed them. You won't be able to sell them. You won't be able to buy them. So,
Dank J says, Lori's a sexy mama. The devil made me say it, Brian. Love.
Oh, man. Dank, you going at my girl?
That's fucked up, whoa.
Dude, what's
up? You
up?
gotta get served up, whoa.
No, I think so, too, though.
Stephanie says, I would love to sit down and drink wine with Lori.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. It's a good thing, But so a couple more things before we head out here. I do want to just cover a couple more things. Is that I think that when it comes to business of breeding reptiles, diversity is important. I think that when you're too narrow in one project, you kind of put yourself into a hole. And I don't necessarily mean that you have to work with different species. I personally have always felt that was the best role, is to go with ball pythons and colubrids and boas and whatever the case may be. Because you got to remember, there's always going to be cycles, right? But even within, let's say you just want to do ball pythons, it's not a good idea. Like I talked about with clowns, I think clowns have a long life ahead. And I was just completely speculating if Justin was saying maybe there's too many clowns out there, because I don't know that that's how he feels. But what if there is too many clowns out there? And you put all your money into clown ball pythons.
All your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, it becomes a problem. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, because maybe 20 years from now, clown ball pythons will still be all the rage. But it's better to go, all right, I'm going to do some clowns. I'm going to do some tri-stripes. I'm going to do some, whatever, lavender albinos, whatever the case may be. If you want to stay with recessive stuff, genetic stripes, whatever the case may be. I think diversity is important. And I think that if you become too narrow, when something goes wrong and that market falls out, you don't have a safety net. And that goes back to what I was saying 6 years ago when we became more diversified with our income streams, is that we were no longer relying just on breeding and selling reptiles to pay the bills. And I think it's the same thing within reptiles, is if you are going to really focus on reptiles, keep yourself diversified so that you're not just producing one type of ball python or one type of corn snake or whatever the case is. Have more diversity, because 1 year corn snakes are going to be hot. 1 year, colubrids in the last few years have literally went insane. We are selling colubrids sometimes for 10 times what we sold them for 5 or 6 years ago, and literally selling them as quick as we put them on our website. And people were telling us to get out of colubrids 5 years ago, that they were dead, that it was stupid to even breed colubrids. And 5 years later, people are standing in line throwing money at people that have colubrids. So if I would have listened and went out of them and not been as diversified, we would have probably, definitely not done that. The other thing I think is, and this goes back to what I was talking about a little bit with chasing, right? Not chasing. And this is trying to take the emotion out of things, right? It's really easy to get emotional about buying into, even more so with animals, because you're emotionally like, it's an animal, One thing, if you're buying a piece of property, you can get emotional about like, man, I really want to be on that riverfront. And that if I don't buy that, I'm not going to be able to be on the riverfront. But it's still just a piece of property. You know what I mean? There's going to be another riverfront property eventually. But when you get into like, I want that leopard gecko, I want that ball python, it's really easy to get emotional. But try to take that emotion out as much as you can. That doesn't mean once you get it, you aren't emotional, because then you should be emotional about it. But getting into a project, a lot of times don't chase things and become like, if I don't buy this today, I'm never going to get an opportunity again, because you don't know if maybe missing that opportunity might bring a better opportunity tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I want to stress too. I learned over the many years of doing this that if you can take the emotion out of the decision, oftentimes you're way better off, So anyways, do we have anything else, Jay?
That's it. I have a question for you though.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I've noticed obviously, but this is before ball pythons, but a lot of the people that started in the in the reptile world were breeding colubrids. Right?
Yeah.
In the States.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Is that because colubrids are here? Like we have a ton of colubrids that you can actually find here? Like in South America, were they more, before people were importing other things, were they breeding boas?
No, not really. I mean, I think what happened was it was just pythons were more difficult to breed.
Gotcha. Okay.
They were more difficult to breed and more difficult to hatch. You got to remember Ernie Wagner, again, a legend I would like to talk about in the future on Legends of Reptiles. He is still alive. I don't know what condition he's in. And I would do anything to have him out. To be in the same room with him right now would be amazing. He bred the first Burmese pythons.
Okay.
And I remember talking to him about it. It was in the 60s, and I remember talking to him about they had no idea how to hatch the eggs. None. So
Really?
He said he went 2 or 3 seasons of killing every single egg. And what they would have to do oftentimes is like, all right, I've got 40 eggs. I'm going to take 10 eggs and incubate them at this temperature and this humidity, and I'm going to take 10 eggs over here, and I'm going to take 10 eggs. And he killed more than he hatched until they finally figured out how to hatch them.
And the recipe.
So, the recipe, whereas colubrids are very forgiving. You just throw them up on the shelf. They hatch.
Got you. Okay.
So I think that's why colubrids were just much more prevalently bred back in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, because once we dialed in the ball, I remember a guy named Tom Huff who had the Reptile Breeding Center in Toronto. Again, another legend that unfortunately isn't around anymore, but he was a legend. He did a lot of the early study of hatching pythons, whether it was D'Albert's pythons, Bismarck ring pythons, so on like that. Ball pythons have always been relatively easy to hatch. The problem is that they, when you were importing wild-caught adults, very few of them did well.
Right.
And really quick side note, we'll talk more about this in the future, but ball pythons are interesting. Like people don't understand that another kind of legend I'd love to have on. I think it'd be a guy named Joe Fossey. Joe Fossey's a guy that's down in Tampa who, ironically enough, you got to remember when ball pythons were coming into the country for the majority of the before captive breeding and farming over in Africa, they were coming in wild caught. They were not doing well. High mortality rate, would very rarely eat in captivity. And they did very bad, so that's why people weren't really breeding them. Even though the eggs were easier to hatch, the production was hard because you couldn't get them to eat. They were really species specific to jerboas and ASF rats, which weren't being produced back in the day. And who's going to feed a jerboa that costs $50 to a ball python, right? So what happened was Joe Fossey was going to, I believe, the Florida State or University of Florida, and a guy named Emmanuel Noah from Accra, Ghana, was also going to school, and they were roommates. Joe Fossey was into snakes. Noah came from Ghana, the place where most ball pythons were being exported.
That's so crazy.
And he spoke to Emmanuel Noah about hatching ball pythons, collecting gravid females, letting them lay their eggs in Africa, hatching them, and then sending baby ball pythons over. And if it wasn't for Joe Fossey and just the happenstance of Emmanuel Noah being dorm roommates,
so crazy,
we wouldn't have the ball python world that we have now, because Emmanuel Noah was the first person to farm ball pythons in Accra, and it was only like 200 a year. And then ultimately that 200 turned into 100,000 ball pythons a year between Accra, Lomé, Togo, and Abomey, Continent, Benin. So literally those are the things that I love. I love the history of,
that's
that
so
type
cool.
of stuff that most people have no clue.
Badass, dude. That's so sick.
Yeah, it's so cool. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for the super chats. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Let me know again in the comments now, because the stream is going to be down here in a minute, what you think about the solo stuff, if you want me to keep going, what topics you want me to talk about. This has been a blast. Way more fun than I expected it to be.
Too.
So this was really, really fun. Thank you so much for everything. I really do appreciate you guys. Have an absolutely amazing night. Make sure to hit all those subscribe things, and you know all that.
Share it with your friends.
That garbage stuff. Have a wonderful night. And I look forward to doing this again, and we'll continue this conversation. It's cool.
That was dope, dude. 7.7.